Why would a president warn a team at the very moment they should be celebrating? Burkina Faso's young footballers had returned with something their country could celebrate. They had fought through a difficult tournament, defeated powerful opponents, and brought home a trophy. Yet when these young men stood before Ibrahim Traore, his message was not simply congratulations. Stay focused. He repeated that warning because, in his view, victory was not the end of their responsibility. It was the beginning of a much greater one. Traore told the players to remain humble, disciplined, and united. He wanted them to protect the spirit that had carried them this far, and to remember that whenever they stepped onto the field, they were representing Burkina Faso. But there was another side to his message that deserves attention. Traore acknowledged that difficulties existed within Burkinabe football. He admitted that previous approaches may not have been the right ones. He also suggested that changes were being prepared and made a remarkable point about the country's young talents. For too long, he argued, others had done more to nurture some of Burkina Faso's young people. Now, he said, it was time for Burkina Faso to take care of its own youth. That transforms this meeting into something much bigger than football. The question is no longer simply whether these young players can win another trophy. It is whether Burkina Faso can build a system capable of discovering talent, protecting it, developing it, and turning youthful potential into something that strengthens the nation itself. And there is a responsibility on both sides. Young people must bring discipline and humility. Their country must provide opportunities worthy of their efforts. If you want to follow stories about Africa that look beyond the ceremony and examine what these changes could mean for the continent's future, stay with this channel. Because the trophy these players carried into that room represents what they have already achieved. What happens after the celebration may tell us far more about what Burkina Faso hopes to become. The warning becomes more meaningful when we look at what these young players had just accomplished. Burkina Faso did not reach this moment through a single fortunate result. The young Stallions opened their campaign by defeating Togo 3-1. They then drew 1 goal each with Ghana before facing Nigeria, one of the most established names in African youth football. Burkina Faso won that match 2-0. That result could have been dismissed as one exceptional night, but the tournament gave them another opportunity to prove otherwise. After defeating Nigeria 2-0 in the semi-final, Burkina Faso met Nigeria again, this time with a trophy at stake. The young Stallions did not simply repeat their earlier victory. They won 4-1. Twice they faced Nigeria, twice they won. That is why Traore emphasized that the achievement was not merely a matter of luck. These young men had earned the right to feel confident, but confidence and complacency are not the same thing. That distinction explains why Traore kept returning to the same instruction. Stay focused, remain humble, do not allow yourselves to be distracted. For young players, success can create new pressures almost overnight. Attention increases, expectations rise, opportunities appear. People who were absent before victory may suddenly become interested. A young athlete who knows how to handle defeat may discover that success presents an entirely different test. Traore was therefore asking them to protect the qualities that had helped them win in the first place. Discipline, humility, unity, and concentration. The trophy proved what this generation could accomplish. It did not guarantee what would happen next. A larger African competition lies ahead, where stronger expectations will follow them, and yesterday's victories will count for very little once the next match begins. That is perhaps the deeper lesson behind Traore's repeated warning. Failure can test a young person's courage, but success can test his character. Burkina Faso has discovered a generation capable of winning important matches. The next challenge is ensuring that applause does not become a distraction, and that confidence does not become complacency. Their first mission was to win. Their next mission is to remain worthy of the opportunity that winning has created. So what is the larger mission now facing these young men? The easiest answer would be another trophy. Burkina Faso will expect them to compete improve, and carry the national colors proudly when they return to the African stage. For a football team, winning matters. No serious competitor enters a tournament hoping merely to participate. But Traore's message suggested that the mission does not end at the final whistle. The first part is sporting responsibility. These players have demonstrated their potential. Now they must continue developing it. Every victory raises expectations, and every higher level demands greater preparation. What worked yesterday may not be enough tomorrow. The second part concerns character. Traore repeatedly connected concentration with humility. These players are still young. Recognition can arrive faster than maturity, and talent can open doors before a young person has learned how to handle everything waiting behind them. That is why discipline matters. The objective is not to prevent these young men from enjoying success. It is to ensure that success does not begin controlling them. Then comes the third and perhaps most important part of the mission, representing Burkina Faso with dignity. Traore repeatedly brought the conversation back to the homeland. When these players wear Burkina Faso's colors, their behavior becomes part of what they represent. The responsibility is therefore measured not only by goals, victories, and medals, but also by how they conduct themselves when people are watching and when nobody is watching. Older generations understand this lesson well. Talent can create an opportunity, but character often determines what a person does with it. A country should celebrate young people who demonstrate extraordinary ability, but its greater hope should be that those young people grow into responsible men and women who understand that their gifts carry obligations as well as rewards. That is why this mission is larger than a cup. The trophy tells Burkina Faso what these young footballers were capable of during one tournament. Their discipline, humility, unity, and choices will reveal what kind of generation they may become. And once we understand that distinction, another question becomes unavoidable. If Burkina Faso expects so much from these young people, what responsibilities does Burkina Faso itself have toward them? That question changes the entire meaning of the story. It is easy for a country to tell young people to work harder, remain disciplined, and serve the nation. It is much harder to ask whether the country has created an environment worthy of that commitment. Traore acknowledged that difficulties existed inside Burkinabe football. He said there were important matters that had not been openly discussed and suggested that the previous approach may not have been the right one. We should not speculate about what those undisclosed problems were. There is not enough evidence to label them as corruption, political conflict, or anything else. What matters is what Traore said next. The method had to change. For years, he argued, young Burkinabe talent had often been supported by teams and countries elsewhere. Now, Burkina Faso had to make a deliberate decision to take care of its own young people and nurture its own talent. That creates a powerful balance of responsibility. Burkina Faso can demand concentration from its young players, but those players can reasonably expect a system that gives their concentration somewhere to lead. They need qualified coaching, safe facilities, meaningful competition, education, medical support, and pathways that allow talent to develop into a sustainable career. In other words, responsibility must travel in both directions. A young athlete cannot expect the state to create success for him. He must train, sacrifice, learn, and remain disciplined. But a nation cannot continually demand excellence from young people while leaving talent to survive by accident. This is where Traore's message becomes more significant than the ceremony surrounding one football trophy. Burkina Faso is confronting a question shared by many African nations. How much human potential has been lost because talented young people were discovered too late, supported too little, or forced to look elsewhere for opportunities their own countries could not provide? Taking care of your own youth does not mean closing the doors to the outside world. It means building enough capacity at home that cooperation with others becomes a choice rather than a necessity. The players standing before Traore had already demonstrated their responsibility. They had trained, competed, and won. Now the larger test begins. Can Burkina Faso build an environment capable of matching the ambition it is demanding from them? If Burkina Faso wants to turn that ambition into something permanent, the answer cannot depend on speeches alone. There are signs that the country is beginning to build a broader structure around youth and sport. In 2026, government plans included efforts to strengthen school and university sports, expand training opportunities, develop regional sports academies, and prepare facilities for athletes competing at higher levels. This matters because talent usually appears long before a young athlete reaches a national team. A gifted child may first be noticed at school, on a neighborhood field, or during a local competition. If there is no system connecting that child to trained coaches and organized competition, talent can disappear before the country ever knows it existed. That is why school sports can become an important foundation. Burkina Faso has also discussed the development of regional sports academies and the Centre des Stallions, intended to support higher-level athletic development. Government reporting further indicated that nearly 2 million young people participated in physical and sporting activities during the first half of 2026. Those figures show activity, but they should not be confused with success. 2 million participants do not mean 2 million athletes are receiving professional development. A new stadium does not automatically produce champions. An academy building cannot teach discipline by itself. A functioning system requires trained coaches, education, medical care, fair selection, regular competition, responsible management, and a realistic path for young athletes whose careers may never lead to professional football. There is another reason for caution. Traore told the players that a new program was being prepared, but the available information does not establish exactly which program he was referring to. It would therefore be wrong to attach promises or projects to that statement without evidence. What can be said is that his remarks came during a period when Burkina Faso was already pursuing several sports and youth initiatives. Now comes the difficult part. Plans must become functioning institutions. Facilities must be maintained. Young people outside major cities must have opportunities too. And programs must survive changes in leadership. That is the difference between celebrating a talented generation and building a system capable of producing the next one. The real measure of Burkina Faso's commitment will come after the ceremonies, when nobody is holding a trophy, and the daily work of developing young people must continue. But even the best facilities cannot replace something every generation needs: guidance from those who walked the road before them. Traore made that responsibility clear when he addressed the former players accompanying the young team. He reminded them that they had experienced situations that should not be repeated with this generation. He did not explain every situation in detail, so we should not invent what he meant. The principle, however, is unmistakable. Experience should protect the next generation from repeating avoidable mistakes. A former player knows things that cannot always be taught in a classroom. He understands the pressure surrounding an important match, the disappointment of injury, the temptation that can accompany sudden recognition, and the difficult choices that appear when a promising young athlete begins thinking about his future. If those lessons disappear when a player retires, the country loses valuable knowledge. But if veterans return as mentors, advisors, coaches, and examples, yesterday's experience can become tomorrow's protection. Traore placed a similar responsibility on the coaching staff. He described their relationship with these young players as something approaching that of a father with his children. That comparison matters. A coach working with teenagers and young adults is not simply teaching formations or preparing them for 90 minutes of football. He may also be helping young men understand discipline, disappointment, responsibility, success, and consequences. This creates a chain of responsibility. The player must take responsibility for himself. The coach must guide the player. Former players must pass on what experience taught them. The federation must create a serious sporting pathway, and the country must build an environment in which all of those pieces can work together. No single link can carry the entire burden. Perhaps that is why Traore repeatedly spoke about remaining united like members of one family. A strong family does not prevent every mistake. It does something more realistic. It gives younger members people who can warn them before certain mistakes become permanent. For Burkina Faso, that may be one of the greatest resources this U20 generation can receive. Not merely better facilities or greater attention, but the accumulated wisdom of people who already know how quickly a promising career can rise, change, or disappear. The future becomes stronger when the next generation does not have to learn every lesson the hard way. That idea of family leads to another part of Traore's message: what young people can learn through sport itself. Football may look simple from the stands: 22 players, 1 ball, 2 goals, and a final score. But inside a functioning team, every player is constantly learning that individual ability has limits. A gifted striker still needs someone to create the opportunity. A talented midfielder still has to defend. A player who wants attention may sometimes have to make the pass that allows somebody else to score. That is why organized sport can help young people practice qualities that matter far beyond the field. Discipline means arriving prepared even when nobody applauds. Teamwork means understanding that another person's success can also strengthen your own. Perseverance means continuing after defeat. Humility means recognizing that talent does not remove the need to learn. And belonging means knowing that your actions can affect everyone around you. International research on youth development supports the idea that well-organized sport can contribute to physical health, mental well-being, cooperation, persistence, and social connection. But there is an important qualification. Sport does not automatically produce good citizens. A poorly managed team can teach bad habits just as easily as a responsible one can teach valuable lessons. Young athletes still need good coaches, supportive families, education, safe environments, and institutions that protect them. This is why Traore's image of the team as one family matters. He was not proving that all of Burkina Faso is united simply because 11 players cooperate on a football field. That would go too far. Instead, the team offers a useful picture of what collective discipline looks like. Different personalities, different talents, different responsibilities, one shared objective. No serious team survives for long if every player believes his personal ambition matters more than the group. And that principle reaches beyond football. For Burkina Faso, the challenge is to give young people places where discipline and cooperation can be practiced, not merely praised in speeches. A trophy can inspire thousands of children to dream. A strong sporting culture can give some of those dreams structure. And if that structure teaches young people how to work with others while developing their own abilities, then the value of sport becomes much greater than the number of medals displayed in a cabinet. This brings us back to Ibrahim Traore and the larger questions surrounding his influence. His message to the young footballers did not appear in isolation. In other public statements, Traore has described young people as a precious resource for Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel. His government has also connected sports with physical health, discipline, productivity, and stronger social bonds. That helps explain why his words to the U20 team went beyond football. Traore was not simply asking whether these players could win again. He was presenting them as part of a generation whose abilities should be developed, organized, and directed towards something larger than individual success. There are 3 levels by which that vision should be judged. The first is vision. Here, the direction is relatively clear. Traore repeatedly emphasizes youth, national responsibility, discipline, self-reliance, and the need for Burkina Faso to invest more seriously in its own people. The second is policy. There are real initiatives that can be examined, including school sports, planned regional academies, sporting infrastructure, and programs intended to support higher-level athletes. The third level is much harder. Results. At the middle of 2026, the government reported that the ministry responsible for sports, youth, and employment had completed about 43% of its annual objectives. That is progress. But it is not a finished transformation. This distinction matters because Traore should not be presented as the man who has already solved Burkina Faso's sporting problems. A speech is not a system. A presidential initiative is not automatically a permanent institution, and political popularity cannot substitute for measurable results. A more accurate description is that Traore is attempting to establish a different relationship between the state and its young people. He demands responsibility from them while arguing that the country must accept greater responsibility for developing their potential. That is an ambitious bargain. Its success will not ultimately be determined by applause surrounding Traore or by criticism directed against him. The real test is whether these ideas become institutions strong enough to function year after year. Because the deepest form of leadership is not creating a program that depends forever on one leader. It is helping build a system strong enough to continue when that leader is no longer there. There is, however, another side to the story. Traore has attracted significant admiration across parts of Africa, but he has also faced criticism from some Western media organizations, human rights groups, researchers, and policy institutions. Some critics argue that his personal image has become so powerful that symbolism can sometimes move faster than measurable results. Others raise concerns about political accountability, restrictions affecting the media, and the environment in which competing narratives about his government are heard. Those concerns should not simply be dismissed because they come from outside Burkina Faso, but neither should criticism of Traore automatically erase every initiative taking place under his government. Both approaches create the same problem. They replace evidence with emotion. There is another complication. Traore's popularity has made him a frequent target of misleading online content. Videos have circulated using altered material and artificial intelligence to attribute statements to him that he did not make. That should make anyone covering Burkina Faso more careful. Supporting an African leader should never require inventing achievements for him. Criticizing him should never require ignoring achievements that can actually be documented. The fairest test is much simpler. Look at the results. Will young talent be discovered earlier? Will the planned facilities function properly? Will athletes receive better coaching and protection? Will opportunities reach young people beyond the largest cities? And most importantly, will these institutions continue working when the political leadership eventually changes? Those questions cannot be answered by one football tournament or one presidential speech. They require years of evidence. That is why the debate surrounding Traore should not be reduced to whether the West approves of him or whether his supporters admire him. The more important question is whether Burkina Faso can turn political ambition into lasting national capacity. A trophy can provide a moment of proof. A functioning institution provides proof repeatedly. And that is a much harder standard, but ultimately a far more useful one. And now we return to the words that started this story. Stay focused. At first, those words were directed toward a group of young footballers, but perhaps their meaning reaches much further. African countries that want to develop their young people must also remain focused, not for one tournament, one election, or one generation, but long enough to build institutions that endure. The first lesson is simple. Do not only chase trophies. Build a system that can produce the next generation after today's champions are gone. That means connecting schools, talent identification, coaching, healthcare, competition, education, and realistic career opportunities. The second lesson is that young people need both opportunity and responsibility. Governments cannot demand discipline while providing no pathway forward. But young people cannot expect investment without accepting the sacrifice and responsibility that opportunity requires. The third lesson concerns older generations. Former athletes, coaches, parents, and experienced citizens should become bridges for those coming behind them. Their mistakes and successes can save young people years of unnecessary struggle. The fourth lesson is that sovereignty does not require isolation. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and other countries across West Africa can cooperate with the outside world while still developing the ability to make their own choices and invest in their own people. And finally, no national project should depend forever on one man. Whether the name is Ibrahim Traore, Assimi Goita, Abdurrahmane Chani, or any future African leader, the strongest legacy is an institution that continues working after its founder leaves. That is also where criticism from France, other Western voices, or supporters of these governments should ultimately be tested, not by slogans, but by measurable outcomes. The African Union and governments across the Sahel should pay attention to that lesson. African news should not merely ask who gave the most powerful speech. It should ask what changed afterward. Will these young players win again? Perhaps. Will they experience defeat? Almost certainly. But the greater question is whether Burkina Faso can give this generation something that survives both victory and defeat, a structure capable of developing their talent and preparing those who follow them. Tell us whether you believe African countries should invest more seriously in school sports and youth development. And follow this channel if you want to continue examining the choices shaping Africa's future. A trophy tells us who won today. How a nation develops its young people tells us what it is preparing for tomorrow. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.